Hey guys, welcome to the Tetra Health and Performance Podcast. Today we're tackling the topic of habits and how they impact us and how we can improve them. We'll start off with a cool little
A quote?
intro.
Yep.
Yeah.
So a quote I really like by William Jan is that all of our life is but a mass of small habits, practical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual, that bear us irresistibly towards our destiny. And what you get from this, you kind of get the idea that habits is what builds us. And I think of habits in different ways. Like we often think of habits as good or bad, but they're actually they're needed. We can think of like how and today it'll be fun to talk about habits, a little bit more about what's actually happening, just so we kind of like, the more we understand ourselves, the more we can use that information to like build off ideas for ourselves. Like often people are told, I think too often, this is how you should build habits, this is what you should do. Well, first of all, it's nice to understand what are habits, how are they created, maybe what's going on. And then once we have that information, we can then utilize that information to make the right choices that maybe suit ourselves better than just being told what to do. And like I was just saying, I feel that habits are they're not just both good and bad; they're needed. You probably know, everyone's experienced it, where you can walk, like, or you can get into the car and you can drive to work, and you can be like, "Oh, how did I even get here?" Well, that's your brain reserving energy. It's something that we do often has become a habit, and it's become an unconscious activity which reserves a lot of energy for the body, rather than have to consciously think about everything all the time. And if you look at the brain, we've got like our prefrontal cortex, which is the newer part of the brain that is we often refer to as a like the rider. And well, what happens is the prefrontal cortex is more of your conscious brain that makes decisions for you, these conscious decisions. Well, deeper in the brain, we have what we refer to often as the elephant. And in this part of the brain, what's actually happening is we're more wired naturally. But these things aren't energy. They don't cost as much energy. So once something gets deep down in the brain, it forms as a habit. Then from there, we can reserve energy with our actions, and we can kind of just run on habits. So habits aren't just good or bad. They're actually needed in our body.
These constant unconscious and conscious actions that we take with them as well. And it's hard to scan and see how these impact us and do they influence us into the direction we want to go. And that is a really tough spot with habits to kind of scan back and go, okay, these unconscious actions are driving me to someone I don't want to be, or these now conscious actions that I'm making are now slowly building me to where I need to go. So that does take that ability to take a step back and to scan what is happening through a day, through a week, through a month lens, or whatever it happens to be.
And these habits aren't always simple. They're kind of like, in your brain, pathways have been made, and some of these pathways are extremely complex, and they've taken a long time to work their way. So, for example, I think of it like a river, and we know that most natural rivers have taken a long time. The water's come down from the hills, and it's slowly worked its way back to the sea. And well, once that's happened, a path is formed, and once that path is formed, well, that's the path of least resistance for the river. And that's the same way when we're thinking, well, that's our path of least resistance. So it's going to be hard for us to divert that path. And the more complex, the longer the river, the harder it's going to be for us to divert a path and change what we might be considering right now, when I explain this, a bad habit. And habits are formed throughout your whole life, right? Like they're formed from a younger age when you are less conscious. And then later in life, when you become more conscious of some of your actions, you have to go out of your way consciously to change these habits for the better. Like Mitch just mentioned, to like overall, to as you are a sum of your habits. And in that quote, we actually want to try and have a sum of our habits to be good habits, or things that make us a better person or help us achieve the person we want to be.
How crazy, right? That upbringing, how it affects you into adulthood, and your genetics, and how your environment as a young fella or a young lady, and how that crafts you to unconscious behavior later on in life.
And I think it's super interesting to think that your prefrontal cortex, so that rider, is actually not fully developed until you are in your 27, 28 years old. So you can imagine how easy it is to make a bad decision while you're younger, and then how in that later life, and I think most people have experienced this when they are a little bit older, that they actually now are a bit more conscious of their actions, and they actually want to be maybe a better person. They want to work towards these habits to grow towards someone successful in their business, right? It could be anything. It could be like stronger, fitter, look better naked. All these goals that we want to achieve. Well, habits are the way we want to habits are what we want to use to get there.
Most definitely. What direction we want to go with the habits is a large one. Um, to take a step back and go, the direction I want to go is like what James just said. It can be anything. Habits can build us to any direction we want to go. It can be a fitter individual. It can be I want to be better with my money. It can be I want to be a more present partner, parent, or whatever it happens to be. So taking that step back and go, this is the direction I want to go. It can impact one area, but hey, here's a really cool thing. Impacting one area can actually have a flow-on effect to another area as well. E.g. saying like I might want to be better with my sleep habits might lead into now making better decisions with my eating, with my training, and it kind of compounds and rolls, and it has like a multifactorial kind of impact to your health and your wellness. So taking that step back and going, hey, what can I do? What direction do I want to go, and how can this impact me as a whole system? Is a tricky thing to do, but a massively powerful way to put yourself in a healthier, stronger direction.
Yeah, and lots of habits. When you do look at them as a habits, like we think of it as behavioral change, right? We actually want to change our behavior, so that our habits, and then to change our behavior, we use habits. Like we take the behavior and we look at our behavior as a big sense of how we act, and then we take little habits to change our behavior. And like Mitch just mentioned, well, we got these things like keystone habits. So a keystone habit is a simple act of changing one habit that will affect other things. So we can find habits that have bigger effect on other habits, and then we get this kind of like snowball effect, and it actually becomes a behavioral change at the end. So you can look at, like, for example, I think a really good example of this. Well, Mitch just mentioned sleep, which is a really good one. Like if you just think the simple act of improving your sleep at the end of the night and getting a better night's sleep, well, that's going to drive you to waking up fresher in the morning and being more productive, maybe being happier with your family, all the things that we just mentioned. So it can have a massive effect on your life, and we consider that a keystone habit. Another keystone habit I think of that's really obvious is what we do for a living is getting a coach, training in a gym, and making that positive effect on increasing energy through the gym, feeling better about your appearance, feeling better about yourself, feeling healthier, and all the benefits that are going to come from that. So like Mitch just mentioned, like chunking, well, we can choose one habit that is going to have a massive effect on a bunch of other habits. And how often do we see that someone joins a gym, for example, and all of a sudden they're eating better because like, oh, well, I just trained really hard. Well, I'd rather eat well and I want to fuel my body. So it is important when choosing habits for behavior change that you, rather than choose habits that maybe aren't so directed at where you want to be, you choose the easiest, the lowest hanging fruit, we like to call the linchpin. And that just means that like the easiest thing in your grasp to succeed in to get results.
And reiterate this again, like we are the sum of we are the sum of our daily habits. So meaning like what we do compounded over a day, a week, a month, a year, or whatever, it's going to have a massive effect to who we are as a person. Even these little 1% habits, and they build up and build up and build up, whether it be positive to who we want to be or whether it subtracts away from the person we'd like to be. It has a long lasting impact over courses of months and years and so forth. So like what James just said, if like you look to join a gym or you look to address your sleep, these are massive steps into who you want to be. Like a cool thing with the gym, something that kind of almost ups the chance of success, is having someone to help you or to keep you accountable, to like share what your habits or your goals are with someone else, and they can keep you accountable to your actions as well. What I think is why we get a lot of success here within the gym is it's having a smaller membership base. We try to talk to everyone or as many people as we can, hear where they're at and where they want to go, and kind of re-engage them on that and go, hey, how's this going? Or, we haven't seen some progress here. What's going on at home? What can you address? What keystone habit? What linchpin, low actionable effort can we go for to impact you into back into a positive effort?
And the reason things like accountability do work is we can look at them. We have this, there's a good saying called the three R's. And the three R's are a loop that goes on in your brain. And just spoke about that river. And then when we want to kind of like change the path, well, that river, the way that river keeps flowing is it has something that reminds you to start that river. So for example, you have a reminder, an action that takes place that then triggers you to then do a certain routine. And then once you've done that routine, you finish the routine and you get a reward. I think a really easy example for that is is, I think, smoking. It's such a simple example, and when we think of habits and bad habits, I feel like quite often smoking is the one that comes to mind. So it's an easy example is, for example, that someone might be working in a job and they might feel a little bit tired. And then when they feel tired, they go, "Oh, well, I'll quickly have a cigarette break." Yeah, right? So they go have a cigarette break. That's their routine. Stand outside for 5 to 10 minutes. They have the cigarette, and then they're rewarded by feeling a little bit more relaxed. They're rewarded by having that little bit of extra energy. They're rewarded by being to the side. So what that actually starts is a loop where from now on we have these things that then trigger us to have a cigarette. I go through that routine of having the cigarette, and then I'm rewarded by maybe the nicotine of the cigarette and all them other things. It's not, and just the habit itself of like having something in your hands or something like that. So this is often the kind of the process that we have to break. And these processes, they're not simple processes. They're very complex. So it's not always just the one thing that triggers you. It could be a series of things that trigger you. It could be that, for example, you after a long day of work, you get home and putting the keys in the door, stepping inside the door, for example, then like changing your clothes and getting out of your clothes then triggers you to open up the fridge and have a beer, right? And you might not even want that beer, but eventually it becomes routine. And then you're rewarded by the stimulant of the beer, you're relaxed by the beer, and then it becomes a cycle. So you could be like when you walk into your door, you are triggered instantly to have a beer, even if you don't want that beer. Like when you feel tired at work, you can be triggered to want a cigarette, even when you don't actually eventually want that cigarette. And then breaking out of these loops is incredibly hard. So we've got to try and then look at what we do that results in our actions, and then we've got to try and break that loop, which can be so hard. And one of the best ways to break that loop is, like Mitch just mentioned, like things like accountability can be your action to get you back into the gym. So you could be someone who, for example, you struggle to get to the gym. So what actually happens is you go home, you open up the door, you lie on your sofa, you relax, you put the TV on, boom, that's your trigger to then start relaxing. Your reward is just lying down and feeling comfortable, and that kind of like the hormone change. Well, if all of a sudden you get a text from your coach or a friend who wants to go to the gym, well, that can be the perfect reminder to set this new routine up to then be rewarded by what it feels like to train, which is very, very hard to do because again, when we go back to the river, you have to break the path of the river. So it's not going to be easy at first, but having someone help you with accountability to then get you to start that new routine, and then you just got to stick with it. So you've got to do that quite a lot, and it's not going to be easy at first. It might not be natural. It might be not your most natural pathway, but as you start doing it, you've got to trust in the process that eventually this is going to lead you in a better direction.
That accountability is so powerful. And these unconscious actions, like obviously good or bad, and when we're trying to change directions, it's quite tricky, and you have to make it very easy and very attractive to start off with. Like, let's say going to the gym or picking up your gym sessions is a task for you, and you're waking up in the morning, like that trigger point, just putting your gym clothes on and having it right next to your bed might be just enough to go, okay, I've got my gym clothes on. Now I'm going to take the next step. I'm going to pack my towel, my water bottle, and get out the door. Awesome. That might be all you go for. And if you do that action, that's a step in the right direction. But if that's too hard, you might go, okay, I'm just going to put on my gym clothes. I'm just going to walk around the house for a couple of minutes and see what happens from there. So you can really break it down rather than go, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to crush it 7 days a week, nonstop, I'm going to be an animal. That might be way unattainable and something that just won't stick. And you can just keep breaking it down to something super simple and super achievable, something that have that conversation with yourself that I am definitely going to be able to do this. What's the minimal thing that I can agree to and sustain? And then look to build on that as we go along.
Yeah, totally. And when we're looking at that, like Mitch just said, that we're looking at the low-hanging fruit. We're looking at things that are very achievable at first, and we don't want to overdo it because, as we've discussed quite a bit recently, we have this kind of set point in our body, both mentally and physically. Well, our body wants to kind of keep doing what it's used to doing. And as we want to step out of that, we don't want to create too much of a stress on the body where it finds it so hard that it relapses and goes back to where it was. So we've got to kind of like break that river gently, and we just got to keep that river flowing gently rather than it seeming back into the original river's path.
The brain's adaptable, man. Like if you start introducing this new pattern or whatever it happens to be, you will rewire the brain into these new actions. And these new actions eventually will come unconscious actions that you just do, and you don't have to put so much brain power behind. But it does have to be conscious to start off with. It has to be a mindful intent to break down that habit and slowly build it on. Then eventually it will just go to the background and you'll be ready to take on a new habit and start building and layering as you go along.
And this is all new science, right? Like, so actually, maybe 50 years ago, they believed that humans were so impulsive that actually it had nothing to do with us being able to override things. They believed that we were just the product of actions that we previously done. And now science shows that humans can and do, that we are completely different to any other animal in the sense that we can actually override things, and we can use these habits and these strategies. That is new science. So it's actually, however much we talk about habits, oh yeah, I've heard that all before. Well, this is new science. This is stuff that's come out over the last 20, 30 years where we actually know now that humans can override and we can become pretty much whoever we want to be. And I think everyone can think about that at times that they've tried to do something and have not succeeded just because they maybe have given up. That's the main reason people don't succeed. The main reason that people don't succeed is because they gave up early. And failure is the process, right? People are going to fail. You're like, as we've discussed already, this is complex. Like, this is not easy for you to override a previous habit. But once you fail, you can't just give up. You have to fail and then learn from your fail, which I think is very underutilized. People hate themselves when they fail way too quickly. And the first thing you do when you fail is you need to be, wait a second. And we just spoke about that that the 3 R's, right? So the first thing that happens when you fail, you need to think, okay, what triggered me? What reminded me to go back into my old habit? Yep. You look at that and you start understanding, okay, so I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen again. Yeah. And like Mitch just said, that could be that you didn't have your gym clothes ready. So in that 5-10 minutes, you allowed yourself to resort back to your previous habit. So it can be like, hey, well, next time I'm going to have my gym kit ready at the door, and it's not an excuse for me anymore. So you find that these are not easy things to do, and we really want to we got to look at why we failed, and then work back on that again. And then as we do that over and over again, we're going to fail again. You're going to fail again. The more complex the habit, right? That's why we want to make things simple at first, but as you change some simple habits later on, we're going to change these more complex habits. And as that happens, we need to allow ourselves to fail again, but keep getting back on the horse, as the expression is.
Simplicity before complexity. And that simplicity, again, it stems from knowing what direction you want to go to. And try not to juggle too many habits at once. It's nice just to start off with one thing. Honestly, one, as we said earlier, that low-hanging fruit. And when you start off with that one thing, can we sustain this for a week, a fortnight? Cool, I got multiple days in a row. I could sustain this for, let's say, just a random number, 14 days is a nice little effort. If I can do that, all right, let's either A, level up this habit into something that might be a little bit more tricky. And again, not too much, just a level up. Or let's maybe introduce another very easy habit and see if we can juggle these two at the once. And when you can sustain that first one, again, it's now subconscious, it's just doing its thing. And we're just working on that one habit that we introduced.
And these principles apply to everything. Funny enough, like we've discussed this over and over again, but we're just discussing it in a different lens. If you look at training, like you want progressive overload. Well, you don't want to do too much too quickly, but you want to make sure there's a continuous stimulus. And we also like to have these kind of deload weeks as well. Well, it's the same kind of thing. Having a maintenance phase is really important. Like you learn a habit, you get good at that habit, and then you just allow yourself maybe like a month with that habit, and then you add something on. So you actually get some time to just push that habit really deeply in. There's lots of different numbers. Like I wouldn't stick to that. I hear a lot of people say like it's 30 days or it's 60 days. Well, I don't think there's any exact science on how long it takes a habit to be formed. And it's like, again, we go back to that river analogy. It's like once the river is really strong, it's always there. So you can always resort back to the old habits, but you just have to make the new habits even stronger.
This can be in something that we look and we quantify a habit. Like say, for example, we might have something up on the fridge, like a month calendar where we write our habit and we start to tick it off. And when we know we can tick it off for a continuous amount of days, and like James said, whatever said days it happens to be, let's just, again, just easy use of easy numbers. Let's say 10 days in a row, we get tick, 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 tick. It might be time to introduce something. But if you get across to a couple of them, and no big deal, then we've got to look back and go, okay, why couldn't I sustain this habit for these 2 or 3 days here? What went wrong? And then we can look to reevaluate that and try and either A, simplify it, or B, break it down, or C, maybe we have to change that habit into something else. But to have something visually in front of you to go, hey, we can kind of tick this off and we can see that visual gratification to like, hey, I did this. It's massive, and it can kind of really be that nice reward center to the body. Say, hey, I did this. Well done. Big tick for me. I achieved this. And just enough of that can be that little pat on the back to what you need to sustain and maintain whatever said habit you're trying to work on.
And again, looking at when you do make mistakes, and then being accountable for your actions and being honest with yourself is super important. Like honesty is the best policy. And we discussed it last week on the podcast, how people do inherently lie to themselves. And once you actually lie to yourself about something, then you actually lose trust in yourself. So if you can just be honest with yourself and you can just discuss to yourself why you might have messed up. And it could be anything, right? It can be that you wanted to go out for dinner, so it kind of like with the social event, it kind of destroyed everything. And then just being easy on yourself, understanding why you maybe didn't get it, and then just starting again, accruing more days in that action. I think people are way too harsh on themselves when they fail, and failure is a part of the process. Sadly, if we were perfect, like if it wasn't the case, then we'd all be only good habits, and we'd all be, well, civilization would be way further than it is already.
It is what it is. Like life happens, and it's absolutely normal. We all have it, right? Where it throws us off the direction we want to go. But to go, all right, that's all right. Let's get back on the horse and let's keep this train going. Or it happens, right? We take a step back, we'll take 2 steps forward, and we take another step back, we'll take another 2 steps forward. And guess what? We're still plus 2 steps. It's all good stuff.
And as we discussed as well, we have that compound effect. So what happens is, as we build these up, all these actions, these habits over a long period of time, and even that slight 1% increase daily is massive, right? That we call it the compound effect, because if we have that slight 1%, when people often think that's not enough, well, a 1% daily increase over the year becomes a massive compound, like of high interest in a way. So if you can just make these slight changes, yeah, and don't rush too much, and then just allow that to compound over the course of the year, you are just a better human being to what you were last year. And then obviously with compounding, well, we can look at that kind of good and bad habits now. So you have every good habit is going to be a slight plus. Well, you might be adding good habits into your daily life, but you've also got to kind of like get rid of some of the bad habits. And there's going to be like most people know what their bad habits are. And we just kind of discussed a few of them, maybe going home, lying on the sofa, maybe too often grabbing a glass of wine or a beer at the end of the night, or too many of them. Maybe it's smoking. And we're looking at them habits, and we want to try and like make our total sum of actions positive over the year. So you don't have to get rid of all your bad habits in one go, as well as you don't have to increase tons of good habits. You can just take away one bad habit and just work on that, and slowly take another one away and slowly work on that. Because it's actually going to be pretty harder to get rid of bad habits than it is to add good habits.
They're probably going to be pretty ingrained. Like you even think of like a bank account balance. Like every good habit you're doing, you're putting $1 into your account, and every little bad action you're doing, you're taking $1 out. By the end of the week, month, whatever it happens to be, we just want to be in a positive. We don't need to be making massive amounts every week or really influxing that bank account. We just want to be in a slight positive. And how often do we talk about like gym work, habit, whatever it happens to be, being a long-term game? You don't need that instant gratification straight away and that instant improvement. 9 times out of 10, that crashes and burns. The ability to have that delayed gratification to go, hey, my success will come over a moderate to a long effort. That's kind of where this will be built with long-term success. And to go, it's okay right now not to have instant success, but I will slowly build there in X amount of time.
And that's trust in the process. So we want to have this trust in our process. Like if we know, and like we're saying, like there's a lot of science behind this. Actually, there's a lot of science to prove that these things work as we add these little habits in. But like Mitch just said, you can't see the instant gain. Well, how many people join a gym, start training, without seeing any results for weeks and weeks and weeks, but they still do it, right? And eventually we just know that it happens. Well, it's exactly the same with nearly all habits, right? You have to trust in the process of knowing that this is going to improve you, and you will reap the benefit way later on. That's that delayed gratitude. But that's where I think having a coach or having someone who keeps you accountable is so important, because they're gonna help you on the process. A, to keep you accountable, and the coach is just gonna find the fastest pathway to the results. And the hardest thing is you have to wait a while to see the results, right? So once we get the results, then it becomes way easier because we've made this new reward loop. But until then, you have to trust in the process.
Yeah. How to make a habit successful? Like as we said, we've talked about simplicity. We've talked about making it easy. Habit needs to be super obvious. So these are like the 4 laws of behavioral change. So whenever we look at something, you want to have these kind of 4 things in play. It needs to be super obvious. So this can be something like, I don't know, having my gym clothes. If I want to go to the gym, I want my gym clothes right out in front of me. It wants to be attractive. So, okay, anything more on obvious? Do you want to elaborate on that? think just having the clothes out is, say we want to go to the gym, having the clothes out nice and ready is one thing that's super easy.
I think actually the idea of, as well as obvious, is you need to have your goal set out. You need to know what you actually want to achieve, and that has to be obvious. And we discuss it all the time, right? We discuss it as a why. So you have to kind of know your why behind what you're trying to achieve, and eventually that will become obvious to the person. It can't be too unthought of. Like it can't be that I just want. We've discussed this in a whole podcast, but your why is so important. Actually thinking about, why do I want to do this, and then ask yourself why again. And when you get that kind of more, we call it intrinsic, so this deeper internal reason for why you want to do something things, then it can make it more obvious to you. Actually, actually that makes sense. That's why I want this.
And to have a trigger point to make it obvious in front of you when you're going to hit that habit. So we talked on that earlier, those triggers. Having that first initial trigger to you, that is clear as day to go, okay, now I've got to do my habit. And that can be anything, as like, I don't know, say we go to the gym, might be clothes, it might be the coffee machine's already prepped, and something that's going to kind of start to trigger this process. The next one is going to be, it has to be attractive. All right, it has to be, again, you could make this almost say easy, but it needs to be attractive. This could be something like, I bought some new gym clothes, they're looking gorgeous, I want to rock them, I want to make this look good when I go there, or whatever that happens to be.
Exactly. Is this appealing to you? Does this resonate? Is this something that you can see yourself working towards, and the fruit of your labor being worth it?
Yeah, and we'll stay on the same effort for like, say, where our task is to go to the gym. Is it easy? Is the gym nearby? Is it a good time for me to train? Are there going to be many roadblocks getting in my way? I want it to be as clear as day. I've got my gym clothes on. I look fabulous. I've had my coffee. I'm feeling good. And now when I head to the gym, there's no roadblocks in front of me. I can get there in 10, 15 minutes. There's whatever it happens to be.
And your low-hanging fruit, is it the easiest thing that is kind of a keystone habit that you can get the most out of? Like, so am I choosing a habit that's going to have effect on other habits? And you can, again, we're touching this keystone habit just quickly. It's like, if I can choose these small habits that can be quite hard to affect, when I can choose this one big habit that can be the easiest habit to affect, that affects them habits and just has this ricochet effect on all the other habits. So when we talk about low-hanging fruit, like, it's kind of like, is it the low-hanging fruit? Is it the easiest thing to attain, especially when you're starting out your kind of like your self-improvement journey?
So you got number one, make it obvious. Number two, make it attractive. Number three, make it easy. And the last one, it has to be satisfying. You have to enjoy it. So again, so say it's still the gym route. After the gym session, I feel good. It was good. It was fun. My body feels good. All those lovely, happy, feel-good chemicals are flooding the body. We had a fun time. We had a laugh. We did some hard work. And that's going to kind of reinforce that pattern. And this can be applied to anything. We just used a gym example because we're a gym. Guess what? It's easy for us. But you can apply it to absolutely anything. But they're kind of 4 quadrants that you'd want to play with to kind of have some success with whatever said habit has to be.
And that's your when we spoke about the 3 R's, the reminder, routine, and reward. Well, that satisfying is your reward. Do you feel rewarded from this habit? And then once we know that we are going to be rewarded from the habit, we're creating that loop. And there's voluntary and involuntary actions from habits. Like, from training, like voluntarily, I'm training. I'm pushing hard on a bike to succeed what I've done previously. Well, involuntary, and you don't always know it's happening. Well, you're being rewarded, like Mitch said, with hormones. Like, you're getting feel-good hormones. You're getting serotonin. You're getting dopamine from achieving your result. Well, you've got voluntarily in your brain consciously, you know that you've achieved it. So you're like, yes, well done. I'm proud of myself. But involuntarily, automatically, your body is actually receiving a ton of hormones that are then physically and mentally, you're rebuilding this habit. So it's never just as simple as it's mental. It's always going to be physiological and psychological.
And with those 4 laws of behavioral change, you can also apply this to a bad habit. For example, you'll have a snack attack maybe late in the afternoon, and rather than having those snacks somewhere that's nice and easy and very visually present, you might have to hide those. So that obvious factor, it's harder to find that trigger, that ease of access. So if you can hide those away, or even better, just don't buy them. But if you can hide them away and just make it 1 or 2 levels harder, that can be just enough barrier that you don't have to dive in or and start that chain of events. And as well, like we talked about, tracking it or having something on the wall. If you do have that trigger point, then you've got to put a big old cross against that habit. And you're like, oh, crap. And now that's not a great feeling. And so we got satisfied and obvious of now being kind of, ticked with that bad habit. So these 4 laws of behavior change can be applied obviously to habits that we want to work on and cultivate to push us to who we want to be. And you can use those for habits that you don't really like, those bad habits, that kind of impact you to a decent level. So it's something to kind of reflect on and play with. And like James just said, start off with the easy stuff first, the low-hanging fruit. But as you start to build, you can start to look at some of those bad habits as well and trying to take those out of your lifestyle and make sure that they're not with you anymore.
I think one of the best sayings, and this was towards smoking, but it's don't quit quitting. So with bad habits, like it's the same thing as when aiming for a good habit, failure, and then continuously you fail slightly, get back on, learn from your mistake. Well, with quitting, it's the same thing. Like if you're trying to stop something, it's trying to stop a bad habit, then don't quit quitting. Yeah, keep up the process, keep working on it as much as you can, and off that, it's just consistency. As again, we say this all the time, it's the same things over and over again, but remind yourself that it's the consistency that is most important, right? If you miss a day, fair enough, right? If you miss 2 days, fair enough, but just get back on the horse, go again, and you will slowly get better at it. It'll get easier and easier with time on. So, however, if you really want something, you just don't quit. Or bad habits, you do quit.
There's some great reading materials on this. Like a lot of what this stems from. If you like the actual read, Atomic Habits is fantastic. The Compound Effect is another great one. These are easy, quick reads as well.
And The Power of Habits by Charles Duhigg is incredible. It's my favorite.
They'll be like the top 3, I think.
Yeah, totally.
Easy, and
I like the Power of Habit for the reason that it has a lot of storytelling in it. So there's an example of everything, and it gets a little bit into the brain science of things as well. Atomic Habits, I do love because it's such implementable, if that's the right word, information. It's very easy to utilize. And I think the simple act of reading a habit book is while you're in that act, you are making yourself more conscious. So I would say that, say for example, if I'm trying to build some habits and I'm trying to improve myself over these next few months, then I would say that picking up a habit book can be super important because it's continuously reminding you to keep working on what you're doing. It's tough stuff, but again, just making sure that you pay as much attention to the process, have as much simple thought in your mind about why you may have done something. And I think sometimes it's pros and cons, like writing down in a list, like what can I improve on? What do I need to maybe get rid of? And how can I just improve slightly over the course of the next year? The Compound Effect, Mitch just touched on this book, is one thing I do love is it follows 3 people through a 5-year journey. It has the person that changes no habits and he just maintains the same, right? As the person who actually picks up a bad habit and he over the course of 5 years he drops off slightly and becomes you could say a lesser person. I think it's pretty harsh, but then you have the person that just picked up a 1% habit daily and they increase massively on where they were over the 5 years. And I think that's a good mental image to always keep in mind when you're trying to improve on the journey, improve your habits, and trust in the process.
It's I forget which book this one was from, but the marshmallow study.
Oh yeah,
and the ability for delayed gratification, really cool. It's like a study done with young kids. I think it was like 5 or 7 around that age group.
No, it's been repeated tons and tons of times in many different scenarios. I'm pretty sure now.
Very infamous. And so the kids are put in this room, and like there's a marshmallow in front of them, and the studier goes, "Hey, you can eat this now if you want. I'm going to walk out of the room, and when I come back, if you wait and you don't eat it, I'm going to give you 2 marshmallows." So the kid's got a choice, like I can smash this right now, or obviously wait. And they're unsupervised, they're by themselves, and I think it's 15 minutes they waited, and then they come back in. And like obviously, the kids, most of them smash it, some of them wait. And how they distract themselves is pretty funny. Like some of the more mature kids will sing to themselves or dance around or carry on to try and distract themselves from staring at that marshmallow. And anyway, this study went for ages, and they studied them all the way through to like adulthood. And the kids that ate the marshmallow really quick and smashed it in had, this is pretty rough, but had low income jobs, had low IQ scores. There was less benefit later in life, and those individuals that had that ability for delayed gratification and held out that 15 and got to smash the 2 delicious marshmallows, higher IQ, higher paying jobs, were more likely to sustain like long-term habits. So that ability, and this is hard because these are kids, right? That ability to be able to delay that initial gratification and start to wait later on and see the long-term gain, like everything we've talked about at the moment, right? Massively influential at a young age, but massively impactful still at a later stage of life.
I think them two images that we just painted for you really really are worth a lot of money. Like like you can really see like how long term, like over long term, small little habits are going to make a big difference for you. And it's talking about kids and them starting. Well, it's never too late to start. Like there's never too late to pick up some good habits and drop off some bad habits.
Test this on my kids when I get home. Like,
Get
what
some
potential do we have here?
moldy marshmallows. Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh well, I think that's everything, right?
Yeah. It's a great topic, but you do see it repeats a lot of the same, and it's I know that's not sexy, right? But it is what it is. Identify, first of all, you have to know who you are, what direction that you want to go as an individual. And if you know that direction, we need to break that down and develop a system to get there. And those systems are layered habits. So knowing what is the easiest, most impactful habit that I can start off to push me to who I want to be. Who I want to be can be anything. It can be financial, it can be family, it can be healthy, it can be whatever. I need to break it down. And when I break it down, I've got these habits planned out. Well, I don't have to fully plan them out, but I need to start with one. Then we can develop a system that builds us into who we want to be. And some things that make those habits really successful is accountability, making them really easy, having those 4 layered systems, like to make it obvious, to make it attractive, to make it easy, to make it satisfying. All these things will just up your chance of making these sustainable long-term habits. You want to track this, and this can be like a visual tracker on your fridge at home. It can be in your phone, whatever it happens to be. But something that you can look off and tick off and feel good about after doing that habit. And after it's turned into an easier thing to achieve and more subconscious, and you're like, hey, I can do this now. This is part of who I am. Look to level it up or look to introduce a new habit. And then we slowly layer these things over whatever course of period it happens to be. And like as we said earlier, we touched on multiple times, that long effort, man, you can really change from who you were to who you want to be.
Lovely sum up at the end there. And while it isn't sexy, it has the potential to make you way more sexy.
There we go. Quote that one. I love it. Thank you very much for joining us, guys. Please like, subscribe, engage with us, whatever topics you want to hear. We really look forward to it, guys. We love doing this and look forward to the next one.
Thank you.